Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet wander through the pages of history. Tonight, we'll be exploring a forgotten chapter of ancient life, one that still echoes softly through time. Whether you're settling in with a warm drink or already wrapped in blankets, thank you for letting my voice keep you company tonight. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time of day is it for you? Are you hearing this as the sun rises, or are you, like me, surrounded by the hush of nighttime? If the idea of gentle stories from long ago helps ease your mind, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe. There are many more journeys waiting for us just beyond the veil of sleep. For most of human history, we shared this planet with other human species. We weren't the only thinking, tool-making, fire-controlling beings walking the earth. We had cousins, relatives, and sometimes even neighbors who were just as human as we were, yet fundamentally different. Today, Homo sapiens stands alone as the only surviving human species. But this isolation, it's the exception, not the rule. For millions of years, multiple human species coexisted, competed, and sometimes even interbred across Africa, Europe, and Asia. So what happened to them? How did we go from a diverse family tree of human species to just us? And perhaps more intriguingly, what traces of these ancient relatives still live within our DNA today? I'm about to take you on a journey through time to meet our long-lost human family. We'll walk alongside Neanderthals in Ice Age Europe, encounter the mysterious Denisovans in the mountains of Asia, and discover the hobbit-like Homo floresiensis on remote Indonesian islands. We'll explore how these different human species lived, loved, created art, buried their dead, and ultimately how their stories intersected with ours. But this isn't just ancient history. Recent DNA analysis has revealed that if you're of European or Asian descent, you're likely carrying Neanderthal genes. If you're from certain Pacific populations, you have Denisovan ancestry. We didn't just replace these other humans, we absorbed them into our lineage. The story of human evolution is far stranger and more complex than most people realize. It's not a simple linear progression from ape to modern human. Instead, it's a tangled web of different species branching out, adapting to various environments, developing unique cultures, and sometimes coming back together in ways that shaped who we are today. Let me start with a revelation that might surprise you. As recently as 50,000 years ago, at least 4 different human species were alive simultaneously on this planet. While our ancestors were developing sophisticated tools and creating the first cave paintings in Africa and Europe, other human species were thriving in completely different ways across the globe. The Neanderthals controlled much of Europe and Western Asia, masterfully adapted to Ice Age conditions. They had brains as large as ours, possibly larger, and had been successfully living in harsh climates for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans ever set foot in Europe. Meanwhile, in the mountains and caves of Siberia and Southeast Asia lived the Denisovans, a species we only discovered in 2010 through DNA extracted from a tiny finger bone. These mysterious humans left genetic traces in modern populations from Tibet to Australia, suggesting they had a much wider range and influence than we initially imagined. On the remote Indonesian island of Flores, a diminutive human species called Homo floresiensis, nicknamed hobbits for their small stature, had evolved unique adaptations to island life. Standing only about 3 feet tall, they made sophisticated stone tools and hunted dwarf elephants until surprisingly recent times. And in Africa, our own species, Homo sapiens, was just beginning the expansion that would eventually take us to every corner of the earth. These weren't primitive proto-humans stumbling around with clubs. Each species had developed sophisticated technologies, complex social structures, and rich cultural traditions adapted to their specific environments. The Neanderthals created the world's first known jewelry, buried their dead with flowers, and may have been the first humans to create art. The Denisovans adapted to high altitudes in ways that still help their descendants survive in the Himalayas today. But here's where the story gets really fascinating. These species didn't just live in isolation. They met, they interacted, and yes, they interbred. When modern humans expanded out of Africa starting around 70,000 years ago, we encountered these other human populations, and the meetings weren't always peaceful, but they were often intimate. Recent advances in ancient DNA technology have revolutionized our understanding of these encounters. We now know that most non-African populations carry between 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Some Pacific Islander populations have up to 6% Denisovan ancestry. There are even traces of other, unknown human species in our genomes. Ghost populations that we've never found fossils of, but know existed because they left their genetic signatures in our DNA. This means that extinction might not be the right word for what happened to our human relatives. In many ways, they live on within us. That Neanderthal DNA you might be carrying, it influences everything from your immune system to your pain tolerance, from your hair texture to your sleeping patterns. The story of when we weren't the only human species is ultimately a story about diversity, adaptation, and survival. It's about how different human populations developed unique solutions to environmental challenges, how they created distinct cultures and technologies, and how their legacies continue to shape us today. Over the course of this series, we'll journey to the caves where Neanderthal families huddled around fires, decorating themselves with feathers and shells. We'll explore the high-altitude adaptations that allowed Denisovans to thrive in conditions that would challenge modern humans. We'll uncover the island mysteries of Homo floresiensis and discover other human species that push the boundaries of what it means to be human. We'll also confront some uncomfortable questions. If these other humans were so successful, why did they disappear while we survived? Was it superior technology, better social organization, environmental luck, or something darker? Did we outcompete them, absorb them, or eliminate them? The answers are complex and sometimes troubling, but they're essential for understanding not just where we came from, but who we are today. Because the truth is, we are not pure Homo sapiens. We are a mixture, a blending of multiple human lineages that came together through thousands of years of interaction across continents. This is the story of our extended human family. Brilliant, adaptive, and diverse species that shaped the world and whose legacy flows through our veins. It's a story that challenges our assumptions about human uniqueness and reveals the rich, complex tapestry of our evolutionary heritage. Welcome to the world when we weren't the only humans. Let's meet our long-lost relatives and discover how their stories became our story. But the story of our ancient relatives becomes even more fascinating when we examine what happened when these different human species encountered one another. Far from living in complete isolation, these groups were crossing paths, forming relationships, and yes, having children together in ways that would fundamentally reshape the human story. Picture, if you will, a moment roughly 50,000 years ago, somewhere in what we now call the Middle East. A small band of modern humans, perhaps 20 or 30 individuals, makes camp near a freshwater spring. They've been traveling for weeks, following herds of gazelle and wild horses as they migrate with the changing seasons. As evening falls and they prepare their simple shelters, they notice smoke rising from a distant hillside. The smoke belongs to another group of humans, but these are Neanderthals. Stockier and more robust than our ancestors, with prominent brow ridges and faces that project forward. They've been living in this region for thousands of years. Their knowledge of the local landscape, the seasonal patterns of animals, and the properties of plants runs deep. They've survived ice ages that would have challenged any human population. What happens next isn't warfare or conflict. as we might imagine from Hollywood depictions. Instead, it's something far more human and relatable. Curiosity. Perhaps a young person from each group ventures closer to investigate these strangers. Maybe they share a gesture of peace, an offering of food, or simply sit together and attempt to communicate through gestures and expressions. We know from genetic evidence that such encounters led to intimate relationships and children. Modern humans and Neanderthals didn't just coexist, they interbred, creating offspring who carried genes from both lineages. These weren't isolated incidents, but patterns that occurred repeatedly across thousands of years as human populations expanded out of Africa and encountered their ancient cousins already established across Eurasia. The evidence for this interbreeding is written in our very DNA. When scientists first sequenced the Neanderthal genome in 2010, they made a startling discovery. People of non-African descent today carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA in their genomes. That might sound like a small amount, but it represents millions of base pairs, entire genes, that influence everything from our immune systems to our skin color, from our ability to process certain foods, to our susceptibility to various diseases. But Neanderthals weren't the only ancient relatives contributing to our genetic heritage. In the mountains and forests of Asia, modern humans were also encountering the Denisovans. These meetings, too, resulted in interbreeding, and we can trace Denisovan ancestry in populations across Asia and Oceania today. People in Papua New Guinea carry as much as 5% Denisovan DNA, while populations across Southeast Asia, Australia, and even some Native American groups show traces of this ancient lineage. The implications of this genetic legacy are profound and continue to influence our lives today. Some Neanderthal genes appear to boost our immune systems, helping us fight off infections and diseases. Others influence our skin and hair color, our tolerance for cold climates, and even our sleep patterns. Certain Neanderthal gene variants are associated with a reduced risk of severe COVID-19, while others might influence our likelihood of developing allergies or autoimmune conditions. Denisovan genes, meanwhile, have given some populations remarkable adaptations to extreme environments. High-altitude populations in Tibet carry Denisovan gene variants that help them thrive in low-oxygen environments, allowing them to live and work at elevations that would leave most other people gasping for breath. It's as if our ancient relatives left us genetic gifts, tools for survival that we're still discovering and understanding. This interbreeding also tells us something important about the nature of these different human species. They weren't separate species in the way we typically think of the term. Lions and tigers can interbreed, but their offspring are usually sterile. The fact that human Neanderthal and human Denisovan offspring were clearly fertile and successful enough to pass on their genes suggests these groups were more like different populations or subspecies of a broader human lineage rather than completely distinct species. The genetic evidence also reveals the complexity of these ancient relationships. It wasn't simply a matter of modern humans moving into new territories and occasionally encountering other human groups. The patterns of gene flow suggest multiple waves of interaction, populations separating and reuniting, and complex networks of relationship that played out over tens of thousands of years. In some cases, we can even trace specific episodes of interbreeding. Analysis of a 40,000-year-old modern human jawbone from Romania revealed that this individual had a Neanderthal ancestor just 4 to 6 generations back. This wasn't ancient admixture, but recent family history. Somewhere in this person's recent family tree was a great-great-great-great-grandparent who was Neanderthal. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery came from a tiny bone fragment found in Denisova Cave in Siberia. This bone, no bigger than a pinky finger, belonged to a teenage girl who lived about 90,000 years ago. When scientists analyzed her DNA, they made an unprecedented discovery. This girl, nicknamed Denny by researchers, was a first-generation hybrid. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father was Denisovan. She was literally the child of two different human lineages, living proof of the complex relationships between our ancient relatives. Denny's existence raises fascinating questions about the social dynamics of these ancient human groups. How did a Neanderthal woman and a Denisovan man meet? What were their lives like? Did they communicate through gestures and expressions, or had they developed some form of shared language? Were they part of larger mixed communities, or were they individuals who had left their birth groups to forge new lives together? These questions remind us that behind all the genetic data and archaeological evidence were real people living real lives, falling in love, raising children, and passing on their knowledge and genes to future generations. The cold scientific fact that modern humans carry Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA represents countless personal stories of attraction, partnership, and family formation that played out across the ancient world. The interbreeding between human lineages also had broader implications for human evolution and success. By incorporating genes from populations that had been adapting to Eurasian environments for hundreds of thousands of years, modern humans gained valuable genetic variants that helped them survive and thrive in new environments. It was like acquiring a genetic toolkit specifically adapted for life outside Africa. This genetic legacy continues to influence human diversity today. The variations in skin color, hair texture, facial features, and body proportions that we see across different human populations partly reflect this ancient admixture. We're not just the descendants of the modern humans who left Africa 70,000 years ago. We're the descendants of a complex mixing of human lineages, each contributing their own adaptations and innovations to the human story. The realization that we carry the genes of multiple human lineages has also changed how we think about human evolution itself. Rather than a simple linear progression from earlier to more advanced forms, human evolution appears to have been a complex braided stream, with different lineages separating, developing in isolation, and then reuniting to share their evolutionary innovations. This perspective has profound implications for how we understand human diversity and unity. The genetic differences between modern human populations are incredibly small compared to the differences that once existed between human lineages. A person of European descent and a person of African descent are far more genetically similar to each other than either would have been to a Neanderthal or Denisovan. Yet we all carry traces of these ancient relatives in our genes, connecting us to a shared heritage that spans hundreds of thousands of years. As we continue to study ancient DNA and discover new fossils, our understanding of these relationships continues to evolve. Recent discoveries have hinted at the existence of additional human lineages, ghost populations that contributed to our genetic heritage but have left no fossil record. The human family tree is becoming more complex and interesting with each new discovery. The story of interbreeding between human lineages also highlights the importance of genetic diversity for human survival and adaptation. The fact that modern humans were able to incorporate beneficial genes from other lineages likely contributed to our success as a species. It's a reminder that diversity, rather than uniformity, has been a key to human resilience and adaptability throughout our history. Understanding our complex genetic heritage also has practical implications for modern medicine and health. As we learn more about which genes we inherited from our ancient relatives and how they function, we gain insights into human disease, immunity, and adaptation that can inform medical research and treatment. The Neanderthal genes that influence our immune systems, for example, are helping researchers understand how human immunity evolved and how we might better combat new diseases. This genetic legacy from our ancient relatives serves as a bridge between the deep past and the present, connecting us directly to the human story that unfolded hundreds of thousands of years ago. Every time we look in the mirror, we're seeing not just the product of recent human evolution, but the culmination of a complex process of interaction, adaptation, and survival that involved multiple human lineages working together, sometimes unknowingly, to create the genetic foundation for modern humanity. The next time you feel the urge to sneeze in bright sunlight, a trait some scientists think we may have inherited from Neanderthals, or marvel at someone's ability to thrive at high altitude, possibly thanks to Denisovan genes, remember that you're witnessing the living legacy of our extended human family. We are not just Homo sapiens. We are the inheritors of a rich genetic tapestry, woven from the threads of multiple human lineages, each contributing their own unique adaptations to the magnificent complexity of modern human diversity. Looking at the reference videos and the summary you've provided, I'll continue the script from where Part 2 left off. Here's Part 3. But this genetic legacy goes far beyond simple percentages on an ancestry test. When we carry Neanderthal DNA, we're literally carrying their survival strategies in our cells. Take the EPAS1 gene, for instance. This genetic variant, inherited from our Denisovan cousins, revolutionized human survival at high altitudes. Today, Tibetan populations who carry this gene can live and thrive at elevations that would leave most of us gasping for breath. They're walking proof that ancient love stories didn't just create children, they created evolutionary advantages that echo through time. The story becomes even more fascinating when we realize that different populations carry different ancient signatures. People of Melanesian descent harbor the highest concentrations of Denisovan DNA, sometimes reaching up to 6% of their genome. Meanwhile, certain African populations carry traces of DNA from yet another mysterious human species, one so ancient we haven't even found their bones yet. We only know they existed because their genetic whispers still flow through modern bloodlines. These discoveries have completely revolutionized how we think about human evolution. The old model painted a picture of separate species living in isolation, occasionally meeting and perhaps competing for resources. But the genetic evidence tells a radically different story. Our ancestors weren't just neighbors. They were lovers, partners, and family members who created something entirely new together. Consider the remarkable case of the Denisova cave teenager discovered in Siberia. When scientists sequenced her DNA, they uncovered something unprecedented. She was a first-generation hybrid. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father Denisovan. This young woman, who lived roughly 90,000 years ago, represents a direct bridge between two human species. She's proof that these weren't rare, accidental encounters, but meaningful relationships that produced children who survived and thrived. But perhaps the most profound realization is how these ancient encounters shaped our immune systems. Many of the genes we inherited from Neanderthals and Denisovans are involved in fighting disease. When our ancestors left Africa and encountered new pathogens in unfamiliar environments, their relationships with archaic humans became a kind of genetic insurance policy. The immune system variants they inherited helped them survive plagues and diseases that might have otherwise wiped them out entirely. This genetic gift-giving worked both ways. Recent studies suggest that modern humans also passed along genetic advantages to their archaic partners. Our ancestors brought innovations in tool-making, artistic expression, and possibly even language. In return, they received genetic adaptations that had been refined over hundreds of thousands of years of survival in harsh climates. The evidence for these complex relationships appears in the most unexpected places. Cave paintings in Spain, created over 65,000 years ago, were made by Neanderthals who had learned artistic techniques. Sophisticated jewelry and decorated shells found in Neanderthal sites suggest cultural exchange and perhaps even shared aesthetic values. These weren't simple transactions between strangers. They were the artifacts of genuine cultural relationships. Even our capacity for language may have been influenced by these ancient partnerships. The FOXP2 gene, crucial for speech development, shows signs of introgression from archaic humans. This means that some of our ability to communicate, to tell stories, to share complex ideas, may have been enhanced by genetic contributions from our long-lost relatives. As we've learned more about these ancient relationships, we've had to completely reimagine what it means to be human. We're not the product of a single evolutionary lineage, but rather a magnificent tapestry woven from multiple human species. Each thread represents thousands of years of adaptation, survival, and innovation. When we look in the mirror, we're seeing the faces of not just our recent ancestors, but of Neanderthals who survived ice ages, Denisovans who conquered mountain peaks, and mysterious African populations who left their mark in our DNA. This genetic archaeology has also revealed something beautiful about human nature itself. Despite obvious physical differences, despite potentially different cultures and languages, our ancestors chose connection over isolation. They chose love over fear. They chose to build families and communities that transcended species boundaries. In a world that often feels divided, there's something profoundly hopeful about knowing that cooperation and inclusion are literally written into our genetic code. The story of human evolution is still being written. New discoveries continue to emerge from laboratories around the world, each one adding another piece to this complex puzzle. Recently, scientists have identified genetic signatures suggesting that there may have been yet another archaic human species that contributed to our ancestry, one we haven't discovered yet in the fossil record. The more we learn, the more we realize how interconnected our human family tree really is. These ancient love stories matter because they remind us that diversity has always been humanity's greatest strength. Every major migration, every encounter between different human populations, every mixing of genes and cultures has made us more resilient, more adaptable, more capable of thriving in diverse environments. We are the descendants of survivors who understood that differences weren't threats to be eliminated, but gifts to be cherished and preserved. Today, when we face global challenges that require cooperation and understanding, we can draw inspiration from our genetic heritage, the same spirit that led our ancestors to reach across species lines, to build relationships with those who looked and perhaps sounded different from themselves, lives on in us. We carry within our DNA the proof that humanity's greatest achievements have always come from bringing together different perspectives, different experiences, different ways of understanding the world. The next time you feel the urge to explore a new place, to learn from someone different from yourself, to build bridges instead of walls, remember that you're not just following personal instincts. You're honoring a legacy that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years to a time when love conquered difference and created the genetic foundation for everything that makes us uniquely human. We weren't the only human species, but perhaps we were the most remarkable one, not because we survived alone, but because we survived together. When we weren't the only human species, Part 4. As we peer deeper into our shared evolutionary past, we uncover evidence of something remarkable happening around 40,000 years ago. The genetic data tells us that this wasn't just a story of separate species living in isolation. Instead, we're discovering a complex web of encounters, exchanges, and intimate connections that fundamentally shaped who we became as modern humans. Picture, if you will, the windswept steppes of ancient Siberia. Here, in a cave system known as Denisova, archaeologists made a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of human evolution. A tiny finger bone, belonging to a young girl who lived perhaps 50,000 years ago, contained DNA that told an extraordinary story. This wasn't a Neanderthal. This wasn't a modern human. This was something else entirely, a previously unknown lineage of humans that scientists would come to call the Denisovans. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating. The Denisovans weren't just another extinct branch of the human family tree. They were active participants in our evolutionary story, leaving their genetic fingerprints in the DNA of people living today. When scientists analyzed the genomes of modern populations across Asia and the Pacific, they found something unexpected. People from Papua New Guinea, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia carry substantial amounts of Denisovan DNA, sometimes as much as 5% of their total genome. This genetic legacy isn't just a curiosity for scientists to puzzle over. It represents real, functional adaptations that helped our ancestors survive in challenging environments. Take, for example, the EPAS1 gene variant found in Tibetan populations. This genetic sequence, inherited from Denisovan ancestors, helps people live and thrive at extreme altitudes where oxygen is scarce. Without this ancient gift from our extinct relatives, the high plateaus of Tibet might have remained uninhabitable to humans. The story becomes even more intriguing when we consider the timeline of these encounters. The genetic evidence suggests that modern humans didn't just meet Denisovans once in some chance encounter. Instead, there appear to have been multiple waves of interaction, gene flow, and cultural exchange spanning thousands of years. Some populations received Denisovan DNA through direct contact, while others inherited it through subsequent mixing with groups that had already interbred with these ancient humans. But the Denisovans weren't the only players in this complex evolutionary drama. Across Europe and Western Asia, our ancestors were also encountering and interbreeding with Neanderthals. Recent advances in ancient DNA technology have revealed that these interactions were far more extensive and significant than previously imagined. Modern Europeans and Asians carry roughly 2 to 3% Neanderthal DNA, but this represents just the surviving remnants of what was likely much more extensive gene flow. The pattern of Neanderthal ancestry in modern genomes tells us something remarkable about the nature of these ancient encounters. Rather than random mixing, we see evidence of specific genetic variants being preserved and passed down through generations because they provided survival advantages. Neanderthal gene variants that boosted immune system function were particularly likely to be retained, suggesting that our extinct cousins possessed valuable biological innovations that helped modern humans adapt to new environments and diseases. Consider the implications of this discovery. When our ancestors first ventured out of Africa and into the unfamiliar territories of Europe and Asia, they encountered environments filled with new pathogens, different climates, and novel challenges. The Neanderthals had been living in these regions for hundreds of thousands of years, and their immune systems had evolved sophisticated defenses against local diseases. Through interbreeding, modern humans gained access to this biological knowledge almost instantly, acquiring genetic tools that might have taken thousands of years to evolve independently. This wasn't just a one-way transfer of genetic information. Recent studies have revealed that the interactions between modern humans and Neanderthals were more reciprocal than previously thought. Neanderthal fossils from later periods show evidence of modern human DNA, suggesting that our ancestors also contributed genetic variants to Neanderthal populations. This bidirectional gene flow paints a picture of ancient human populations that were far more interconnected and dynamic than the traditional narrative of separate, isolated species. The story becomes even more complex when we zoom out to consider the broader landscape of human diversity during this period. Archaeological evidence suggests that multiple human lineages were living across Africa, Europe, and Asia during the late Pleistocene. Some of these groups, like the Neanderthals and Denisovans, we know from fossil and genetic evidence. Others remain mysterious, known only through their genetic shadows in modern populations. Recent studies of African genomes have revealed evidence of what scientists call ghost populations. ancient human lineages that contributed DNA to modern Africans, but have left no fossil record. These populations appear to have been as genetically distinct from modern humans as Neanderthals or Denisovans, yet they were living in Africa and contributing to our evolutionary story. This discovery challenges the simple narrative of modern humans evolving in Africa and then spreading to encounter other human species elsewhere. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond academic curiosity. They fundamentally reshape our understanding of what it means to be human. Rather than being the sole survivors of human evolution, we are revealed to be a composite species, a living library of genetic wisdom inherited from multiple human lineages. Our genomes carry the evolutionary innovations of Neanderthals, who survived ice ages in Europe, Denisovans, who adapted to high-altitude environments in Asia, and mysterious African populations who developed their own unique biological solutions to environmental challenges. This genetic legacy manifests in tangible ways in modern populations. The pale skin of many Europeans partly derives from Neanderthal gene variants that helped ancestors synthesize vitamin D more efficiently in low-light environments. The robust immune systems that helped humans colonize the globe include Neanderthal and Denisovan innovations for fighting off infections. Even aspects of our metabolism, our response to high altitude, and our ability to process certain foods carry the genetic fingerprints of our extinct relatives. But perhaps most remarkably, this story of ancient interbreeding reveals something profound about the nature of these encounters. For gene flow to occur on the scale that we observe, these weren't just brief, chance meetings between different human groups. Instead, they suggest sustained contact, cooperation, and integration between populations that traditional paleoanthropology had portrayed as separate species. Imagine the social dynamics of these ancient communities: Neanderthal and modern human groups sharing territories, exchanging technologies, and forming relationships intimate enough to produce offspring who survived and thrived. These weren't primitive beings driven solely by survival instincts, but complex social creatures capable of communication, cooperation, and cultural exchange across what we now recognize as relatively minor biological differences. The archaeological record provides tantalizing glimpses of this intercultural exchange. In several sites across Europe, we find evidence of Neanderthals and modern humans using similar tool technologies and artistic expressions during periods when both groups occupied the same regions. Some Neanderthal sites show evidence of symbolic behavior, cave paintings, jewelry, and ritual burial practices that appears to coincide with the arrival of modern humans in these areas. This pattern suggests that the relationships between different human populations involved not just genetic exchange, but cultural learning and technological transfer. The sophisticated tool traditions that helped modern humans spread across the globe may have been enhanced by knowledge gained from Neanderthal populations who had millennia of experience in European environments. As we continue to unravel this complex evolutionary story, new discoveries keep adding layers to our understanding. Recent excavations have revealed evidence of even more human lineages that contributed to our genetic heritage. The discovery of Homo naledi in South Africa, with its unusual combination of primitive and advanced features, suggests that human evolution in Africa was far more complex than previously imagined. Similarly, the tiny humans of Flores Island, Homo floresiensis, represent yet another branch of the human family tree that persisted until relatively recent times. Each new discovery reinforces the same fundamental insight: we were never alone. Throughout the critical period when modern human populations were expanding across the globe, we were part of a diverse community of human species, each contributing their own evolutionary innovations to our shared story. The genetic data suggests that rather than outcompeting and replacing other human groups, our ancestors integrated with them. creating hybrid populations that combine the best adaptations from multiple lineages. This realization has profound implications for how we understand human diversity today. The genetic variations we see among modern populations aren't just the result of adaptation to different environments after humans spread across the globe. They also reflect the different proportions of ancestry from various extinct human lineages that contributed to regional populations. The genetic diversity of modern humans is, in many ways, a living museum of human evolutionary history. Understanding this complex heritage also helps explain some of the remarkable adaptability that characterizes our species. Rather than relying solely on innovations that evolved within a single lineage, modern humans inherited a diverse toolkit of genetic adaptations from multiple sources. This biological diversity provided the raw material for rapid adaptation to new environments and challenges, helping explain how humans were able to colonize virtually every habitat on Earth in such a relatively short period. The story of our intertwined evolutionary history continues to unfold as new technologies allow scientists to extract and analyze ancient DNA from ever older specimens. Each new genome sequenced from fossil remains adds another piece to the puzzle, revealing new episodes of contact, exchange, and integration between ancient human populations. Recent breakthroughs have even allowed scientists to reconstruct the genomes of individuals who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago, providing unprecedented insights into the genetic diversity and population dynamics of ancient human communities. These studies are revealing that the human evolutionary story is far more complex and interconnected than anyone imagined just a few decades ago. As we look toward the future, this understanding of our composite heritage offers important lessons about human nature and our relationship with diversity. Rather than being the product of a single, pure lineage, we are the result of countless encounters, exchanges, and collaborations between different human groups. Our strength as a species comes not from genetic uniformity, but from the diverse inheritance we carry from multiple human lineages. This evolutionary perspective reminds us that cooperation and integration, rather than competition and replacement, have been central to human success throughout our history. The genetic legacy we carry from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other extinct human groups represents not conquest, but collaboration, evidence of ancient communities that found ways to work together despite their differences. In our modern world, as we grapple with questions of human diversity, migration, and cultural exchange, perhaps we can find wisdom in this ancient story. Our ancestors showed us that different human groups, even those separated by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, could find common ground and create something greater than the sum of their parts. We are all, quite literally, the children of this ancient collaboration, living proof that our greatest strength as a species lies not in our separateness, but in our ability to come together and share our diverse gifts with one another. Here is part 5 of the 12-part script for When We Weren't the Only Human Species. The story of interbreeding between these ancient human species becomes even more remarkable when we examine the archaeological evidence of their daily lives and interactions. At sites like Vindija Cave in Croatia and Denisova Cave in Russia, we find something extraordinary. Layers of occupation that tell us these different human groups weren't just passing ships in the night, but were sharing knowledge, resources, and quite possibly sitting around the same fires. Consider the technological exchanges that must have taken place. Neanderthals had perfected the art of hafting stone tools to wooden handles using birch bark tar, a process that required heating the bark to precise temperatures and understanding complex chemical reactions. When early Homo sapiens encountered this technology, they didn't just observe it from a distance. They learned it, adapted it, and improved upon it. Archaeological sites show a clear progression where Neanderthal techniques appear in early modern human toolkits, and vice versa. This wasn't simple mimicry. It was genuine cultural transmission that required extended contact, communication, and most likely, cooperation. Imagine a Neanderthal craftsman teaching a Homo sapiens apprentice how to work flint, or early modern humans sharing their innovative methods for creating projectile points. These exchanges would have required not just physical proximity, but trust, patience, and a shared understanding that knowledge was valuable regardless of which species possessed it. The evidence for such cooperation extends far beyond tools. At the Grotte du Rennes site in France, we find Neanderthal layers containing personal ornaments, including perforated animal teeth and shells that were clearly used as jewelry or status symbols. For decades, archaeologists debated whether Neanderthals developed these symbolic behaviors independently or learned them from modern humans. The answer, it seems, is both. Neanderthals were creating symbolic objects before they encountered Homo sapiens, but the complexity and variety of these ornaments increased dramatically during periods of contact. This pattern repeats across Europe and Asia, wherever we find evidence of species overlap. In the Chateauperonian culture of France and Spain, we see a fascinating blend of Neanderthal and modern human technologies. Stone tools show classic Neanderthal manufacturing techniques, but they're found alongside bone tools and ornaments that bear striking similarities to early modern human artifacts. It's as if we're looking at the material culture of hybrid communities where different traditions merged and evolved together. The genetic evidence tells us that interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans occurred multiple times across different regions and time periods. But the archaeological record suggests something even more profound. These weren't brief encounters or isolated incidents. They were sustained relationships between communities that lasted generations. Children grew up in mixed groups, learning traditions from both lineages. Adults shared not just genes, but stories, technologies, and ways of understanding the world. We see this cultural blending in burial practices as well. Neanderthal burials show increasing complexity during periods of contact with modern humans, incorporating grave goods and positioning that suggests new ideas about death and the afterlife. Similarly, early modern human burials in regions with heavy Neanderthal presence show distinctive features that don't appear in purely modern human populations. Even in death, these ancient peoples were influencing each other's deepest beliefs and practices. The Denisovans present an even more intriguing case study in ancient cooperation. Despite having only a handful of fossil remains, their genetic signature tells us they were widespread across Asia and successfully interbred with both Neanderthals and modern humans. The famous Denisova 11 individual, the first-generation hybrid of Neanderthal and Denisovan parents, represents just one documented example of what must have been common occurrences across the ancient world. But perhaps the most compelling evidence for cooperation comes from the survival advantages these interactions provided. Modern humans entering Europe had to adapt to climates and environments they'd never encountered. Neanderthals had been successfully living in these regions for hundreds of thousands of years. The knowledge transfer must have been invaluable. How to find shelter during brutal winters, which plants were safe to eat, how to track and hunt cold-adapted animals, where to find the best stone for tools. This wasn't just cultural exchange. It was a survival strategy that benefited everyone involved. Consider the evidence from sites like Kasara Keel in Lebanon, where we find continuous occupation by different human groups over tens of thousands of years. The tool technologies show clear continuity even as the physical characteristics of the inhabitants changed. This suggests that knowledge was being passed down, not just within family groups, but between different species as they occupied the same territories. The cave itself became a repository of accumulated wisdom, with each group building on the innovations of their predecessors. The artistic evidence is equally compelling. The famous handprints in European caves weren't created by a single species. Measurements of hand sizes and proportions suggest that both Neanderthals and modern humans were leaving their marks on cave walls, sometimes in the same chambers. At sites like Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, we find evidence that Neanderthals were creating sophisticated pigments and body paints tens of thousands of years before modern humans arrived in the region. When modern humans did arrive, they didn't replace these artistic traditions. They added to them. This collaborative approach to symbolic expression extended to music as well. Bone flutes found at Neanderthal sites show sophisticated understanding of acoustics and mathematical relationships between notes. When modern humans entered Europe, they brought their own musical traditions, but rather than displacing Neanderthal music, we see a blending of styles and techniques. The famous Divje Babe flute from Slovenia, whether made by Neanderthals or modern humans, represents a tradition of musical expression that transcended species boundaries. The implications of this evidence extend far beyond archaeology and genetics. These ancient interactions fundamentally shaped who we are today. The immune system advantages that many modern humans carry from Neanderthal genes helped our ancestors survive plagues and diseases that might otherwise have wiped us out. The high-altitude adaptations from Denisovan heritage allowed humans to colonize the Tibetan Plateau and other extreme environments. The enhanced brain development genes from various archaic lineages may have contributed to our species' remarkable cognitive abilities. But it's not just about the genes we inherited. It's about the knowledge, the technologies, the artistic traditions, and the survival strategies that were shared between species. When we look at the remarkable achievements of early modern humans, their rapid spread across the globe, their ability to adapt to virtually every environment on Earth, we're not just seeing the success of a single species. We're seeing the cumulative result of hundreds of thousands of years of cooperation, learning, and genetic exchange between multiple human lineages. This collaborative heritage challenges many of our assumptions about human nature and evolution. We often think of evolution as a competitive process, with species fighting for dominance and survival. But the story of human evolution is fundamentally one of cooperation. Different human species didn't just compete, they collaborated, learned from each other, and literally became part of each other through interbreeding. The archaeological evidence suggests that this cooperation wasn't limited to practical matters like toolmaking and survival strategies. We see evidence of shared spiritual and artistic traditions as well. The famous Venus figurines found across Europe show remarkable consistency in style and symbolism, despite being created by different populations over thousands of years. This suggests shared mythologies, religious beliefs, or artistic traditions that transcended species boundaries. Even the evolution of language may have been a collaborative effort. Different human species likely had different vocal capabilities and communication systems. Neanderthals, with their larger nasal cavities and different vocal tract anatomy, may have had vocal abilities that modern humans lacked. Denisovans, adapted to high-altitude environments, may have developed unique ways of communicating across long distances. As these species interacted and interbred, they may have shared and combined their communication systems, leading to the remarkable complexity and diversity of human language. The genetic evidence tells us that this process of interaction and integration continued far longer than we once thought. Rather than modern humans rapidly replacing all other human species, we see a gradual process of mixing and merging that continued for tens of thousands of years. Some regions show evidence of ongoing genetic exchange right up until the last Neanderthal populations disappeared around 28,000 years ago. This extended timeline of coexistence and cooperation helps explain some of the puzzling features of the archaeological record. Why do we see such rapid technological and cultural advances in some regions but not others? Why do certain innovations appear simultaneously in widely separated populations? The answer may be that ideas, technologies, and genetic advantages were continuously flowing between different human groups, creating networks of knowledge and innovation that spanned continents. The story of human evolution, then, is not one of replacement and competition, but of integration and collaboration. We are the inheritors of a legacy that spans multiple species, multiple continents, and hundreds of thousands of years of shared human experience. Every tool we make, every song we sing, every story we tell carries echoes of these ancient partnerships between different kinds of humans who chose cooperation over conflict, integration over isolation. This understanding fundamentally changes how we think about human diversity and difference. The variations we see in modern human populations, from skin color to disease resistance to cognitive abilities, aren't just the result of adaptation to different environments. They're also the legacy of our multi-species heritage, the gifts passed down from Neanderthal craftsmen, Denisovan high-altitude specialists, and other archaic human lineages whose contributions live on in our genes and our cultures. As we face the challenges of the modern world, perhaps we can draw inspiration from these ancient examples of successful cooperation between different human groups. Our ancestors showed us that difference doesn't have to mean division, that diversity can be a source of strength rather than conflict. In their willingness to learn from each other, to share knowledge and resources, and to literally become part of each other's lineages, they created something greater than any single species could have achieved alone. They created us. Here's part 6 of the script, continuing from where the narrative left off while maintaining the engaging YouTube video style. As we delve deeper into this remarkable story of human diversity, we encounter perhaps the most fascinating aspect of our shared heritage: the genetic gifts our ancient relatives left behind. You see, when these different human species interbred, they weren't just creating new family lines. They were essentially upgrading each other's survival software through the most intimate form of biological collaboration imaginable. Think about it like this. Imagine you're playing a massive multiplayer survival game, and instead of competing against other players, you could actually merge your unique skills and abilities with theirs. That's essentially what happened when modern humans encountered Neanderthals in the frozen landscapes of Ice Age Europe, or when they met Denisovans in the high-altitude regions of Asia. These weren't hostile takeovers or simple replacements. They were genetic collaborations that would prove crucial for human survival and expansion across the planet. The evidence for this incredible story lies hidden in our DNA, waiting to be decoded by scientists with powerful computers and sophisticated algorithms. Every time researchers sequence another human genome, they're essentially reading a biological history book that tells the story of these ancient encounters. And what they've discovered is absolutely mind-blowing. Let's start with the Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives who lived alongside modern humans for tens of thousands of years. When our ancestors first ventured out of Africa and into the harsh environments of Europe and Western Asia, they encountered landscapes unlike anything they'd ever experienced. Bitter cold winters, different diseases, new predators, and plants they'd never seen before. But the Neanderthals had been thriving in these environments for hundreds of thousands of years. They were the ultimate survival experts for these regions. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. When scientists analyzed the genomes of modern Europeans and Asians, they found something unexpected. Roughly 1 to 3% of their DNA comes directly from Neanderthals. That might not sound like much, but in genetic terms, it's huge. We're talking about thousands of genetic variants that were literally copied and pasted from one human species to another through interbreeding. But this wasn't random genetic mixing. Natural selection was working like the world's most sophisticated quality control system, keeping the beneficial Neanderthal genes and gradually eliminating the harmful ones. The result? Modern humans inherited a genetic toolkit perfectly adapted for survival outside of Africa. Some of the most important Neanderthal genes that persist in modern humans today are related to immune system function. Think about it. Neanderthals had been dealing with European and Asian pathogens for hundreds of thousands of years. Their immune systems had evolved sophisticated defenses against diseases that would have been completely foreign to newly arrived modern humans. By inheriting these immune genes, our ancestors essentially downloaded hundreds of thousands of years of pathogen-fighting experience. Other Neanderthal genes influence skin and hair characteristics, helping modern humans adapt to different UV levels and climates. Some affect metabolism, allowing for better processing of the different types of foods available in northern environments. There are even Neanderthal genes that influence brain development and function, though scientists are still working to understand exactly what advantages these might have provided. The story becomes even more remarkable when we look at the Denisovans. These mysterious human relatives were first discovered not through fossils, but through DNA extracted from a tiny finger bone found in a Siberian cave. What scientists found when they sequenced that DNA was evidence of another incredible human species that had adapted to some of the most challenging environments on Earth. Modern Tibetans and other high-altitude populations carry Denisovan genes that are absolutely crucial for their survival. The most famous of these is a variant of the EPAS1 gene, which helps regulate oxygen levels in the blood. At high altitudes where oxygen is scarce, this Denisovan gene variant allows people to maintain normal oxygen saturation levels without developing the potentially fatal condition of chronic mountain sickness. This isn't just a minor advantage. It's literally the difference between life and death at extreme altitudes. Without this Denisovan genetic gift, the high plateaus of Tibet and the Andes would be essentially uninhabitable for permanent human settlement. The fact that these genes exist in modern populations is direct evidence that our ancestors didn't just encounter Denisovans. They formed relationships with them, had children together, and passed on these crucial survival adaptations. But the genetic legacy of our extinct relatives extends far beyond just a few dramatic examples. Scientists have identified hundreds of regions in the modern human genome that show clear evidence of interbreeding with other human species. These genetic variants influence everything from disease resistance to sensory perception to physical characteristics. What's truly remarkable is how this process worked. It wasn't just random mixing, it was an incredibly sophisticated form of biological information transfer. Each time a modern human and a Neanderthal or Denisovan had children together, they were essentially creating a new genetic experiment. Some of these experiments worked better than others, and natural selection acted as the ultimate judge, preserving the beneficial combinations and eliminating the harmful ones. This process happened over thousands of years and across vast geographic regions. As human populations spread across the globe, they carried with them this complex mixture of genetic heritage from multiple human species. In some regions, certain extinct human genes provided crucial advantages and became common. In other regions, different genetic variants proved more beneficial. The result is the beautiful genetic diversity we see in modern human populations today. Far from being separate, distinct groups, all modern humans carry within their DNA the evolutionary wisdom of multiple human species. We are living, breathing testaments to the power of cooperation and genetic collaboration across species boundaries. This genetic evidence completely revolutionizes how we think about human evolution and the relationship between different human species. Instead of a story of competition and replacement, we see a story of cooperation and mutual benefit. Instead of modern humans simply outcompeting their relatives, we see different human species sharing their most valuable genetic innovations with each other. But the implications go even deeper than that. This genetic mixing wasn't just about survival. It was about unlocking new potential for human development and expansion. By combining the genetic innovations of multiple human species, our ancestors created populations that were more adaptable, more resilient, and more capable of thriving in diverse environments than any single human species could have been alone. The genetic gifts from our extinct relatives didn't just help our ancestors survive. They helped make possible the incredible journey of human expansion across the entire planet. From the Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, from high mountain peaks to ocean islands, humans have colonized virtually every environment on Earth. And in many cases, the genetic keys to survival in these diverse environments came not from modern humans alone, but from the accumulated evolutionary wisdom of multiple human species working together. This is the true power of the human story, not the triumph of one group over others, but the incredible success that comes from cooperation, sharing, and mutual support across even the boundaries of species. In our DNA, we carry the legacy of this ancient collaboration, and it continues to shape who we are today. Based on the reference materials, here's part 7 of the 12-part script, continuing from where the previous parts left off. The legacy of these ancient encounters runs deeper than we might imagine. When we examine the archaeological record more closely, we find evidence that suggests these interactions weren't merely brief meetings between distant cousins, but sustained periods of coexistence that fundamentally shaped who we became as a species. In caves across Europe and Asia, we discover layers of sediment that tell a remarkable story of cultural exchange and technological innovation born from the meeting of different human minds. Consider the Châtel-Perronian industry, a sophisticated tool-making tradition found across France and northern Spain. For decades, archaeologists debated whether these elegant bone tools and ornamental beads were created by Neanderthals or early modern humans. The answer, as it turns out, reveals something far more fascinating than simple attribution. Recent analysis suggests these artifacts represent a genuine fusion of technologies, where Neanderthal craftsmanship merged with innovations brought by arriving Homo sapiens populations. The tools themselves bear the hallmarks of both traditions, as if two different approaches to problem solving had been combined into something entirely new. This technological fusion wasn't limited to stone tools and bone implements. Evidence from sites like Grotte de Rennes in France shows that ornamental objects, including perforated animal teeth and carved ivory, appear suddenly in Neanderthal contexts around 40,000 years ago. The timing coincides precisely with the arrival of modern humans in the region. Rather than viewing this as simple imitation, many researchers now interpret these findings as evidence of genuine cultural dialogue. Neanderthals weren't just copying their new neighbors, they were adapting and improving upon shared ideas, creating hybrid technologies that neither group might have developed in isolation. The genetic evidence supports this picture of sustained interaction and mutual influence. When scientists first sequenced the Neanderthal genome, they expected to find a clear separation between our lineages. Instead, they discovered something that revolutionized our understanding of human evolution. Modern humans of non-African ancestry carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA, but this genetic legacy isn't randomly distributed across our genome. Natural selection has preserved Neanderthal variants in regions of our DNA that control immune function, skin pigmentation, and metabolism. This suggests that hybridization wasn't just happening, it was providing real survival advantages to our ancestors. Some of the most striking examples involve our immune systems. Several Neanderthal gene variants that we've inherited affect how our bodies respond to pathogens. The HLA gene complex, which helps our immune system recognize foreign invaders, shows clear evidence of Neanderthal introgression. These ancient alleles may have helped early modern humans adapt to new diseases they encountered as they spread across Eurasia. In essence, Interbreeding with Neanderthals gave our ancestors a head start in building resistance to local pathogens, accelerating their successful colonization of new environments. The story becomes even more complex when we consider the Denisovans. While we know far less about these mysterious relatives, their genetic legacy tells an equally compelling story of beneficial hybridization. The clearest example involves adaptation to high altitude. Modern Tibetans carry a variant of the EPAS1 gene that helps them survive in the oxygen-poor environment of the Himalayan plateau. This same variant has been found in Denisovan DNA, suggesting that when the ancestors of modern Tibetans encountered Denisovan populations tens of thousands of years ago, they acquired genetic adaptations that had already been fine-tuned for high-altitude survival. But the Denisovan legacy extends far beyond the mountains of Tibet. Populations across Melanesia, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia carry substantial amounts of Denisovan ancestry, sometimes comprising up to 6% of their genome. Recent research has identified Denisovan variants that affect everything from fat metabolism to immune function. One particularly intriguing finding involves genes related to cold adaptation, suggesting that some Denisovan populations had evolved sophisticated physiological responses to harsh climatic conditions. These discoveries paint a picture of early human dispersal that's far more nuanced than the simple out-of-Africa narrative that dominated textbooks for decades. Rather than modern humans simply replacing archaic populations through superior technology or cognitive abilities, we see evidence of a complex process involving migration, interaction, adaptation, and absorption. Different human groups brought different solutions to the challenges of survival, and the mixing of these diverse genetic and cultural toolkits created populations that were better adapted to their environments than any single lineage might have been alone. Archaeological sites from this period reveal the material traces of these interactions. At Menot Cave in Israel, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of both Neanderthal and modern human occupation spanning thousands of years. The stone tools from different layers show a gradual transition in technology, with innovations appearing and spreading through the population over time. Rather than abrupt replacement, we see what appears to be cultural evolution, driven by the exchange of ideas between different groups. Similar patterns emerge from sites across Eurasia. In the Altai Mountains of Siberia, Denisova Cave has yielded artifacts and genetic material from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans, all dating to overlapping time periods. The cave appears to have served as a meeting ground where different human populations encountered one another over thousands of years. The diversity of stone tool traditions found in the cave's deposits suggests that these meetings involved not just genetic exchange, but the sharing and modification of technological knowledge. The implications of these discoveries extend beyond academic debates about human evolution. They suggest that diversity and interaction have been fundamental drivers of human success throughout our history. When different populations with distinct genetic backgrounds, cultural traditions, and technological innovations came into contact, the result wasn't necessarily conflict or replacement. Instead, we often see evidence of synthesis, adaptation, and mutual benefit. This perspective has profound implications for how we understand human nature and human potential. The traits that make us uniquely human, from our cognitive flexibility to our technological creativity, weren't developed in isolation by a single population. They emerged through a complex process of interaction and exchange among diverse human groups, each contributing their own innovations and adaptations to our shared heritage. The genetic legacy of these ancient encounters continues to shape human populations today. Medical researchers studying genetic disease susceptibility, pharmaceutical effectiveness, and vaccine response are discovering that understanding our archaic heritage is crucial for developing treatments that work across diverse human populations. The Neanderthal and Denisovan variants we carry aren't just evolutionary curiosities. They're active components of our biology that influence how we respond to everything from infections to medications. As we continue to unravel the complex story of human evolution, one thing becomes increasingly clear. We were never alone. The journey that led to modern humanity was a collaborative effort involving multiple human species, each contributing their own genetic innovations, cultural practices, and technological solutions to the challenges of survival. Our success as a species stems not from our ability to outcompete and replace other human groups, but from our capacity to interact, learn, and adapt together. The DNA we carry today is a living testament to these ancient partnerships, a molecular record of cooperation that spans hundreds of thousands of years. In every cell of our bodies, we carry the legacy of our diverse human ancestors, their struggles and innovations encoded in the very fabric of our being. Understanding this heritage doesn't just change how we view the past, it provides crucial insights into human adaptability, resilience, and the fundamental importance of diversity in our continued evolution as a species. Based on the provided scripts and the summary of previous parts, here is part 8 of the 12-part script. As we've explored, the genetic legacy of our extinct human relatives lives on in our DNA today, but their influence extended far beyond biology. These ancient encounters between different human species created something equally remarkable, a rich tapestry of cultural exchange and technological innovation that would forever change the trajectory of human civilization. When we think about what made early humans successful, we often focus on individual traits like bigger brains or better tools. But the real secret to our species' dominance wasn't any single advantage. It was our ability to learn from others, to absorb the best innovations from every group we encountered, and to build upon that knowledge in ways that no single population could have achieved alone. Consider the caves of Europe, where Neanderthal and modern human artifacts are found side by side, sometimes literally layered on top of each other. These aren't just random coincidences. They're archaeological evidence of sustained contact between groups, of ideas flowing back and forth across species boundaries like rivers converging into a mighty stream. At Arcy-sur-Cour in France, archaeologists discovered something extraordinary. Neanderthal-made jewelry and tools that showed clear influence from modern human techniques. These weren't crude imitations, but sophisticated adaptations that improved upon the original designs. The Neanderthals had taken human innovations and made them better, adding their own engineering insights developed over hundreds of thousands of years of European survival. But the exchange flowed both directions. Modern humans entering Europe encountered Neanderthals who had perfected cold weather survival techniques that our African ancestors had never needed to develop. Neanderthal clothing technology, their methods for processing animal hides, their knowledge of which plants could provide nutrition during harsh winters. All of this became part of the expanding modern human toolkit. The story becomes even more fascinating when we look at stone tool technology. For over 1 million years, different human species had been developing their own approaches to tool making. Neanderthals had perfected the Levallois technique, a sophisticated method for producing sharp, consistent stone flakes. Denisovans and other Asian populations had developed their own innovations. When these traditions met and merged, the result was an explosion of technological diversity. Modern humans didn't just replace these older technologies, they absorbed them, combined them, and created hybrid approaches that were more versatile than anything that had come before. A single archaeological site might contain tools made using African techniques, European methods, and Asian innovations, all crafted by the same group of people. This pattern of cultural fusion extended to every aspect of life. Hunting strategies that had been refined over millennia in different environments were shared and adapted. Neanderthals had developed sophisticated techniques for hunting large game in forested environments. Denisovans had mastered high-altitude survival. Modern humans brought their own innovations from the diverse landscapes of Africa. When these knowledge systems combined, early humans suddenly had access to survival strategies for virtually every environment on Earth. It's no coincidence that the period of greatest contact between human species coincides with our rapid expansion across the globe. We weren't just migrating, we were collecting the wisdom of every human population we encountered. The evidence for this cultural exchange goes beyond just tools and hunting techniques. We see it in art, in symbolic behavior, in the very ways these groups thought about and organized their world. Cave paintings in Europe show a sudden flowering of artistic expression, right around the time when Neanderthals and modern humans were in closest contact. These weren't just modern human creations. They represented a fusion of artistic traditions that had been developing independently for hundreds of thousands of years. Neanderthals had been creating symbolic objects for far longer than we once believed. They made jewelry from eagle talons, painted their bodies with ochre, and created abstract designs on cave walls. When this rich, symbolic tradition encountered the artistic innovations of modern humans, the result was an artistic renaissance that laid the foundation for all human creative expression. But perhaps the most important exchange was something more fundamental: different ways of thinking and problem solving. Each human species had evolved unique cognitive approaches shaped by their specific environments and challenges. Neanderthals had developed incredible spatial memory and pattern recognition skills. Denisovans had evolved sophisticated understanding of high-altitude physiology and resource management. Modern humans brought enhanced social cooperation and long-distance planning abilities. When these different cognitive styles came into contact, they created hybrid approaches to problem-solving that were more powerful than any single tradition. Groups that had access to multiple ways of thinking could tackle challenges that would have stumped any homogeneous population. This cognitive fusion is still visible in human populations today. The genetic variants we inherited from Neanderthals don't just affect our immune systems and physical traits. They influence how our brains process information. Some of these variants affect visual processing, others influence memory formation, still others impact social cognition. Modern humans aren't just the survivors of this ancient mixing. We're the living embodiment of hundreds of thousands of years of interspecies collaboration. Every innovation that makes our civilization possible has roots in this deep history of cultural exchange. The development of agriculture, for instance, required knowledge systems that no single human population possessed. Understanding of plant genetics, soil management, weather patterns, food storage, and social organization all had to come together. These knowledge systems had been developing independently in different human lineages for hundreds of millennia. Only when they combined could agriculture emerge. The same pattern holds for every major human innovation. Metallurgy required knowledge of geology, chemistry, and engineering that had been accumulating across different populations. Navigation techniques combined astronomical knowledge from multiple traditions. Medicine integrated plant knowledge, anatomical understanding, and healing practices from diverse sources. Even language itself shows evidence of this ancient mixing. Modern human languages contain structural elements that appear to have been borrowed from the communication systems of other human species. The complexity and diversity of human language may reflect not just our own innovations, but the accumulated linguistic wisdom of all the human species we encountered and absorbed. This perspective completely reframes how we think about human success. We didn't triumph because we were inherently superior to other human species. We succeeded because we were the ultimate generalists, the great synthesizers who could take the best innovations from every group we met and combine them into something greater than the sum of its parts. Our extinct relatives weren't evolutionary dead ends. They were specialized laboratories of innovation, each developing unique solutions to the challenges of survival in their particular environments. When we encountered them, we didn't just replace them, we became them, incorporating their knowledge, their genes, and their ways of being human into our own expanding identity. This ancient pattern of cultural synthesis continues to shape human civilization today. Our greatest innovations still come from the collision and combination of different knowledge traditions. Science advances when researchers from different backgrounds and disciplines collaborate. Art flourishes when diverse cultural traditions interact and influence each other. Technology progresses when innovations from different fields combine in unexpected ways. In a very real sense, we are still following the blueprint established by our ancient ancestors, encountering the other, learning from difference, and creating something new and more powerful through synthesis. The genetic and cultural legacy of our extinct human relatives reminds us that diversity isn't just beneficial, it's essential to human flourishing. Understanding this deep history of collaboration and exchange offers profound lessons for our modern world. The challenges we face today, climate change, disease, technological disruption, social inequality, are too complex for any single group or tradition to solve alone. Like our ancient ancestors, we need to draw on the full spectrum of human knowledge and experience. The story of human evolution isn't a tale of competition and replacement, but of collaboration and synthesis. We are not the victors in some ancient battle between human species. We are the living continuation of all human traditions, carrying within us the accumulated wisdom of every human lineage that ever existed. In our genes, in our cultures, and in our ways of thinking, we remain connected to those distant relatives who shared this planet with us so long ago. They are not extinct. They live on in us, their innovations and insights woven into the very fabric of what makes us human. As we face the challenges of the future, we carry with us the collaborative spirit that has always been humanity's greatest strength. The ability to learn from others, to synthesize diverse knowledge, and to create something greater than any of us could achieve alone. The threads of connection, how ancient bonds still shape us. Deep beneath the surface of our modern world lie invisible threads, ancient connections that still pulse through our DNA like messages from a distant past. Tonight, as we settle into the quiet darkness, let us follow these threads back through time to discover a profound truth about who we are and where we came from. Picture yourself standing in a vast archaeological site, the earth carefully brushed away to reveal secrets buried for millennia. Layer by layer, bone by bone, scientists have uncovered evidence of something remarkable. We were never alone. In caves scattered across Europe and Asia, in the highlands of Tibet, on remote islands lost to time, other human species once walked alongside our ancestors. They laughed, loved, created art, and faced the same fundamental challenges of survival that we do today. The Neanderthals, with their robust frames and sophisticated tool-making abilities, weren't the brutish cavemen of popular imagination. They were artists who painted cave walls, musicians who crafted flutes from bone, and healers who tended their sick with medicinal plants. In the frozen mountains of Siberia, the Denisovans adapted to harsh climates with genetic innovations we still carry today. On the Indonesian island of Flores, the diminutive Homo floresiensis, nicknamed hobbits, developed their own unique solutions to island life. But here's where the story becomes truly extraordinary. These weren't separate chapters in human evolution, isolated and distinct. They were interconnected stories, woven together by countless encounters, exchanges, and intimate relationships that spanned hundreds of thousands of years. Modern genetic analysis has revealed something that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. Within each of us flows the genetic legacy of multiple human species. Europeans and Asians carry Neanderthal DNA, sometimes as much as 4% of their genome. Melanesians and Aboriginal Australians bear significant Denisovan heritage. Some populations show evidence of even more ancient lineages, ghost populations whose names we may never know but whose genes persist in us still. These genetic signatures aren't random artifacts of the past. They're active participants in our present lives. Neanderthal genes influence our immune systems, helping some people fight off certain viruses while making others more susceptible to autoimmune conditions. Denisovan adaptations enable Tibetans to thrive at high altitudes where others would struggle for breath. The robust bone structure inherited from our archaic cousins affects everything from our jaw strength to our resistance to fractures. Consider the profound implications of this discovery. Every time you fight off an infection, every time you adapt to a new environment, every time your body responds to stress or change, you're drawing upon an inheritance that spans multiple human species. You are, in the most literal sense, a living bridge between ancient worlds. The archaeological evidence tells us these encounters weren't brief or hostile. At sites like Cima de los Huesos in Spain, we find evidence of Neanderthals caring for their disabled, burying their dead with flowers, creating symbolic art that speaks to complex inner lives. The sophisticated stone tools found across Africa, Europe, and Asia show clear evidence of technological exchange between different human populations. In Israel's Kafse cave, modern human and Neanderthal remains are found in alternating layers, suggesting these populations shared the same territories for thousands of years. They must have watched each other's children play, shared water sources during droughts, perhaps even told stories around common fires. The genetic evidence confirms what archaeology suggests. These weren't chance encounters, but sustained relationships that shaped both populations. The Denisovans, known primarily through their DNA rather than extensive fossil remains, present perhaps the most intriguing mystery. Their genetic legacy suggests they were remarkably adaptable, spreading from the mountains of Siberia to the tropical islands of Southeast Asia. Recent discoveries in Tibet reveal Denisovan artifacts at impossible altitudes, evidence of human ingenuity that allowed survival in some of Earth's most challenging environments. What emerges from this evidence is a picture of human evolution, not as a linear progression, but as a complex web of relationships, adaptations, and cultural exchanges. Our ancestors weren't competing in a zero-sum game for dominance. They were collaborating, learning from each other, sharing innovations that benefited all populations. The technology we see developing during this period reflects this collaborative spirit. The sophisticated spear points found across Europe show clear evidence of knowledge transfer between populations. The controlled use of fire, the development of clothing, the creation of symbolic art, these advances spread too quickly and too uniformly to have been independent inventions. They were shared innovations, cultural gifts passed between different human communities. Recent discoveries continue to reshape our understanding of these relationships. In Romania's Oase cave, researchers found the remains of a modern human whose genome was 6 to 9% Neanderthal, suggesting their ancestor lived just 4 to 6 generations earlier. This individual represents one of the most direct pieces of evidence for recent interbreeding between human populations. Similarly, the discovery of Denisovan DNA in unexpected places continues to surprise researchers. Populations in Papua New Guinea carry some of the highest concentrations of Denisovan ancestry, while recent studies have found Denisovan genes in places as distant as South America, carried by ancient migrations we're only beginning to understand. These genetic threads connect us not just to our immediate ancestors, but to the entire human family. The diversity we see in modern human populations, our varied skin colors, body types, metabolic adaptations, and immune responses reflects this ancient mixing. We are stronger, more adaptable, and more resilient because of these inherited gifts from multiple human lineages. The story becomes even more fascinating when we consider what it means for human consciousness and culture. The capacity for language, art, music, and complex social organization that defines our species may itself be the product of this ancient collaboration. Different human populations contributed different cognitive innovations, creating a synthesis that was greater than the sum of its parts. The cave paintings at Chauvet, the intricate jewelry found at Neanderthal sites, the sophisticated bone tools of the Denisovans. These artifacts speak to minds capable of abstract thought, aesthetic appreciation, and cultural transmission. Our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were creating meaning, beauty, and identity in ways that transcend species boundaries. As we drift deeper into contemplation, imagine what those encounters might have been like. Picture a group of modern humans, perhaps following migrating herds across the vast steppes of Eurasia, encountering a band of Neanderthals at a water source. Initially wary, they gradually recognize shared needs, shared challenges, shared humanity. Perhaps they begin by trading obsidian for worked bone, medicinal plants for carved ornaments. Over time, deeper relationships form. Children play together while adults share techniques for hunting, toolmaking, healing. Stories are told across the language barrier through gesture, art, and music. And eventually, some choose to stay, to build families that bridge ancient divides. These weren't forced encounters, but choices made by individuals who recognize something valuable in each other. The genetic evidence suggests these relationships continued for thousands of years, long enough to leave permanent marks on our genome, but also on our cultural evolution. The implications extend far beyond biology. The human capacity for cooperation, for seeing beyond immediate tribal boundaries, for recognizing shared humanity in those who look or behave differently. These traits may have been forged in those ancient encounters. Our ancestors survived and thrived not by eliminating competition, but by finding ways to collaborate with it. This perspective transforms how we understand human nature itself. Rather than being naturally territorial and aggressive, we may be inherently collaborative, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of successful intergroup cooperation. The diversity that characterizes human societies, our ability to adapt to every environment on Earth, to develop thousands of languages and cultures, to solve problems through collective intelligence, reflects this ancient legacy of collaboration. Modern genetic research continues to reveal new chapters in this story. Environmental DNA extracted from cave sediments is beginning to tell us about human populations that left no skeletal remains, but whose presence is preserved in the very soil where they lived. Improved techniques for analyzing ancient proteins are extracting information from fossils previously thought to be too degraded to study. Each new discovery adds complexity to our understanding of human evolution. Rather than a simple tree with distinct branches, we're discovering a complex network of relationships, a web of connections that spans continents and millennia. We're learning that the boundaries between species may have been far more fluid than we previously imagined. The story of human evolution is ultimately a story about connection, the deep biological connections that link us to multiple ancestral lineages, the cultural connections that allowed knowledge and innovation to spread across vast distances, and the social connections that enabled different human populations to not just coexist, but to thrive together. As we settle into sleep, surrounded by the quiet darkness, we can take comfort in knowing that we are never truly alone. Within our very cells, we carry the legacy of countless ancestors from multiple human lineages. Their struggles and triumphs, their innovations and adaptations, their capacity for love and cooperation, all of this lives on in us. The threads that connect us to our ancient past are more than just genetic sequences or archaeological artifacts. They are reminders of our fundamental interconnectedness, our shared heritage, our common humanity. They tell us that diversity has always been our strength, that cooperation has always been our strategy for survival, and that the boundaries that seem to divide us are far less significant than the bonds that unite us. In a world that often feels fractured and divided, this ancient story offers hope. It reminds us that our ancestors faced seemingly impossible challenges: climate change, resource scarcity, territorial conflicts, and survived not through dominance or isolation, but through collaboration and mutual support. They built bridges across differences that seem vast to us now, creating relationships that literally shaped our species. We are the inheritors of this legacy of cooperation, carriers of genetic gifts from multiple human lineages, beneficiaries of ancient choices to see beyond difference and build connections across boundaries. As we face the challenges of our own time, we can draw strength from knowing that cooperation, not conflict, is our deepest inheritance. Tonight, as you drift into dreams, imagine yourself connected by invisible threads to every human who has ever lived, every innovation that has ever been shared, every act of kindness that has ever bridged differences. You are part of an ancient story of connection that continues to unfold, a living testament to the power of collaboration and the enduring strength that comes from diversity. The threads of connection that bound our ancestors still bind us today, reminding us that we are not separate species competing for resources, but one human family enriched by our differences and strengthened by our shared heritage. In this knowledge, we can find both peace and purpose, both comfort and hope for the future we will build together. Rest well, knowing that you carry within yourself the wisdom of ages, the strength of multiple lineages, and the eternal human capacity to find connection across any divide. The story of human evolution is still being written, and you are both its author and its most precious chapter. Here's part 10 of the 12-part script for When We Weren't the Only Human Species. As we've explored the remarkable story of our ancient relatives, one of the most fascinating revelations is how these interactions shaped us at the most fundamental level: our genetic makeup. The DNA flowing through our veins today carries whispers of countless encounters between different human species, creating a biological tapestry far richer than we ever imagined. When scientists first began sequencing ancient DNA in the early 2000s, they uncovered something extraordinary. Modern humans living outside Africa carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA, while people from Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands possess up to 6% Denisovan ancestry. These percentages might seem small, but they represent millions of genetic variants that continue to influence our lives today. Consider the story written in the DNA of Tibetan highlanders. Living at altitudes where the air contains 40% less oxygen than at sea level, these populations have thrived for thousands of years in conditions that would leave most of us gasping for breath. The secret lies in a gene variant called EPAS1, inherited from Denisovans, that allows their bodies to produce red blood cells more efficiently and process oxygen more effectively. This ancient gift from our extinct relatives enables entire populations to live and flourish in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The genetic legacy extends far beyond altitude adaptation. Neanderthal DNA has been linked to variations in skin pigmentation, helping some populations adapt to different levels of ultraviolet radiation as humans spread across diverse latitudes. Certain immune system genes inherited from both Neanderthals and Denisovans provide enhanced resistance to specific pathogens, suggesting that interbreeding with local populations already adapted to regional diseases gave migrating humans crucial survival advantages. But perhaps most intriguingly, some of this ancient DNA influences traits we consider fundamentally human. Variants inherited from Neanderthals affect everything from pain sensitivity to sleep patterns, from mood regulation to the texture of our hair. Some people carry Neanderthal variants that influence their response to sunlight, affecting vitamin D production and potentially even seasonal mood changes. Others possess genetic variants that alter pain perception, potentially inherited from populations that survived in harsh Ice Age environments where different pain responses might have been advantageous. The story becomes even more complex when we examine the genetic landscape of different populations today. Indigenous Australians and Papua New Guineans carry the highest levels of Denisovan ancestry, reflecting ancient encounters as modern humans first reached Southeast Asia and Oceania. Europeans show the strongest Neanderthal genetic signatures, while East Asians display a unique pattern suggesting multiple waves of interbreeding with different Neanderthal populations. Recent discoveries have revealed that this genetic exchange wasn't just a one-way street. Ancient DNA analysis suggests that modern human genes also flowed back into Neanderthal and Denisovan populations, creating a dynamic web of genetic exchange that continued for tens of thousands of years. Some late Neanderthal remains show clear evidence of modern human ancestry, indicating that these populations remained in contact and continued interbreeding far longer than initially believed. Scientists have also identified regions of our genome where ancient DNA has been systematically removed by natural selection, suggesting that while some inherited variants were beneficial, others were detrimental. This process of selective retention and elimination continued for millennia after the initial interbreeding events, gradually refining the genetic contributions from our ancient relatives to optimize human survival and reproduction. The implications extend beyond individual traits to entire biological systems. Research suggests that the diversity introduced by interbreeding with multiple human species enhanced the flexibility of our immune systems, providing a broader toolkit for fighting diseases. This genetic diversity may have been crucial for human survival during the agricultural revolution, when increased population density and contact with domesticated animals introduced new infectious diseases. Modern genetic studies continue to reveal new chapters in this story. Advanced techniques allow scientists to trace not just which populations interbred, but when and where these encounters occurred. Some genetic variants can be traced to specific regions and time periods, creating a detailed map of ancient human movements and interactions across continents and millennia. The story of our genetic heritage also illuminates the arbitrary nature of racial categories. Rather than representing distinct biological groups, human populations show continuous gradients of genetic variation, much of it reflecting ancient admixture between different human species. The genetic differences between any two individuals within a population are typically greater than the average differences between populations, underscoring our fundamental genetic unity, despite superficial physical variations. This genetic legacy continues to influence medical research and treatment. Understanding which populations carry specific ancient variants helps researchers develop more effective therapies and predict individual responses to medications. Pharmacogenomics, the study of how genetic variation affects drug responses, increasingly incorporates knowledge of ancient admixture to provide more personalized medical care. The presence of ancient DNA in modern humans also raises profound questions about identity and belonging. We are all, quite literally, the descendants of multiple human species. This biological reality challenges simple narratives about human origins and highlights the complex, interconnected nature of our evolutionary history. Rather than being the sole survivors of a competitive struggle, we are the product of cooperation, adaptation, and genetic exchange between diverse human populations. As we continue to unravel the mysteries hidden in our DNA, each discovery adds new depth to our understanding of what it means to be human. The genetic gifts from our ancient relatives remind us that our success as a species has always depended on diversity, adaptation, and the ability to learn from others. In our genes, we carry not just the story of where we've been, but the tools that helped us become who we are today. This genetic inheritance represents more than just biological curiosity. It embodies the fundamental principle that has guided human evolution for hundreds of thousands of years: the power of connection, exchange, and mutual adaptation. Our DNA tells a story not of isolation and competition, but of encounter, learning, and transformation. In understanding this legacy, we gain insight not just into our past, but into the collaborative spirit that continues to drive human progress and adaptation in our interconnected modern world. Looking at the script summary and reference materials, I'll continue from where the previous parts left off, focusing on the complex legacy and lasting impact of intermingling between early human species. Here's part 11. As we've journeyed through the remarkable story of when we weren't the only human species, we've witnessed a tapestry far richer and more complex than the simple narrative of linear progression once taught in textbooks. The evidence from ancient DNA, archaeological sites, and fossil records paints a picture not of separate species existing in isolation, but of dynamic populations that encountered, interacted, and profoundly influenced one another across hundreds of thousands of years. The genetic legacy of these ancient encounters lives on in every person alive today. When scientists first decoded Neanderthal DNA in the early 2000s, they discovered something extraordinary. Non-African populations carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal ancestry. This might seem like a small percentage, but it represents millions of genetic variants that have been preserved across tens of thousands of years. Some of these variants proved beneficial, helping modern humans adapt to new environments as they spread across the globe. Neanderthal genes have been linked to enhanced immune responses, particularly against pathogens encountered outside Africa. Other variants influence skin and hair color, helping populations adapt to different levels of sunlight and vitamin D synthesis. The story becomes even more fascinating when we consider the Denisovans. Despite having only a handful of fossils from this mysterious group, their genetic signature tells us they were widespread across Asia, from the mountains of Tibet to the islands of Southeast Asia. Populations in Papua New Guinea and Australia carry up to 6% Denisovan ancestry, while Tibetan populations inherited a crucial genetic variant that helps them thrive at high altitudes. This EPAS1 gene variant, inherited from Denisovans, allows Tibetans to maintain normal oxygen levels in their blood despite the thin air of the Himalayan plateau. Without this ancient genetic gift, the roof of the world might have remained uninhabitable to humans. But the legacy of our extinct cousins extends far beyond genetics. Archaeological evidence suggests these interactions involve the exchange of technologies, ideas, and cultural practices that shape the trajectory of human development. The sophisticated tools found at Neanderthal sites, including composite weapons and specialized bone implements, demonstrate levels of innovation that parallel those of contemporary modern humans. When these groups encountered each other, they likely shared not just genes but knowledge, techniques for surviving in harsh environments, methods for processing foods, and perhaps even artistic traditions. Consider the cave paintings of Spain, where recent dating techniques have revealed that some of the earliest artistic expressions may have been created by Neanderthals themselves, predating the arrival of modern humans in Europe. Red ochre handprints and geometric patterns in caves like La Paz Ciega and Maltravieso suggest that symbolic thinking and artistic expression weren't unique to our own species. When modern humans arrived in Europe, they entered a landscape already rich with symbolic culture, potentially learning from and building upon Neanderthal traditions. The exchange wasn't one-sided. Modern humans brought their own innovations, including more sophisticated long-distance trade networks, advanced projectile technologies, and possibly new forms of social organization. The meeting of these groups created a cultural fusion that accelerated innovation on both sides. Archaeological sites from this period show a remarkable flowering of creativity, with new tool types, artistic expressions, and technological solutions appearing with unprecedented speed. DNA studies have revealed that these interactions occurred repeatedly across time and space. Rather than a single interbreeding event, there were multiple encounters between modern humans and Neanderthals, spanning thousands of years. Some of these meetings occurred in the Middle East, around 100,000 years ago, others in Europe between 45,000 and 40,000 years ago. Each encounter left its mark in our genomes, creating a complex patchwork of ancestry that tells the story of our species' expansion across the world. The Denisovan story is even more complex. Genetic analysis suggests there were multiple Denisovan populations, some more closely related to each other than others. Modern humans encountered different Denisovan groups at different times and places, from the Altai Mountains to Southeast Asia and possibly beyond. Some Pacific Islander populations show evidence of admixture with at least 2 distinct Denisovan lineages, suggesting our ancestors were remarkably mobile and encountered diverse groups across vast geographical ranges. Recent discoveries have added new chapters to this story. The analysis of DNA from sediments in Denisova Cave revealed that Neanderthals and Denisovans themselves interbred, creating hybrid populations that lived in Central Asia. One remarkable individual, nicknamed Denny, was discovered to have a Neanderthal mother and Denisovan father, proving that these groups not only encountered each other, but formed lasting relationships and raised children together. These revelations have fundamentally changed how we understand human evolution. The old model of a family tree with distinct branches has given way to a more complex picture resembling a braided river, with populations splitting apart and coming back together repeatedly. This pattern of divergence and convergence appears to be a fundamental characteristic of human evolution, creating the diversity we see in modern populations while maintaining our unity as a single species. The implications extend far beyond academic understanding. This research has revealed that genetic diversity was crucial to human survival and success. The populations that thrived were often those that incorporated genetic material from multiple sources, gaining advantages that helped them adapt to new environments and challenges. The human story is fundamentally one of cooperation and exchange, not competition and replacement. Modern genomic studies continue to reveal new details about these ancient encounters. Scientists have identified specific regions of the genome where Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA is either enriched or depleted in modern populations, suggesting that natural selection has been acting on this ancient genetic material for tens of thousands of years. Some variants have been strongly favored, spreading to high frequencies in certain populations. Others have been selected against, perhaps because they were maladaptive in new environments or genetic backgrounds. The medical implications of this research are profound. Understanding which genetic variants we inherited from our extinct cousins helps scientists identify genes involved in disease susceptibility, immune function, and adaptation to different environments. Some Neanderthal variants appear to increase susceptibility to certain autoimmune diseases, while others provide protection against specific pathogens. This knowledge is informing new approaches to personalized medicine and helping us understand why different populations show varying responses to diseases and treatments. The story of human intermingling also provides important insights into the nature of species boundaries. The fact that modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans could interbreed and produce fertile offspring challenges traditional concepts of what defines a species. These groups had been separated for hundreds of thousands of years, long enough to evolve distinct physical and cultural characteristics, yet they remained genetically compatible. This suggests that the boundaries between human populations have always been more fluid than rigid categories might suggest. Archaeological evidence continues to support this picture of interaction and exchange. sites across Europe and Asia show evidence of cultural transmission between different human groups. Tool technologies appear to spread faster than would be expected from population migration alone, suggesting ideas and techniques were being shared across group boundaries. Symbolic objects like jewelry and art show similar patterns, with styles and motifs appearing in sites associated with different human populations. The analysis of ancient proteins and DNA from archaeological sites is revealing new details about the foods these groups ate, the environments they lived in, and the challenges they faced. This research shows that different human populations often exploited similar ecological niches and faced similar adaptive challenges. When they encountered each other, they likely shared knowledge about local resources, seasonal patterns, and survival strategies that proved crucial for success in new environments. Climate data from ice cores and other sources shows that many of these encounters occurred during periods of environmental stress, when changing climate conditions forced populations to migrate and adapt to new circumstances. These challenging times may have created opportunities for cooperation and knowledge sharing that benefited all groups involved. The genetic and cultural exchanges that occurred during these periods may have been crucial for human survival through ice ages and other environmental crises. The preservation of ancient DNA has also revealed the important role that chance played in determining which genetic lineages survived to the present day. Some Neanderthal and Denisovan genetic variants were lost simply due to random genetic drift, while others persisted and spread. This reminds us that evolution is not a deterministic process, but involves significant elements of chance and contingency. Recent advances in ancient DNA technology continue to push back the boundaries of what we can learn about our deep past. Scientists can now extract genetic information from increasingly ancient and degraded samples, revealing details about human populations that lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. Each new discovery adds complexity to our understanding of human evolution and reveals new connections between ancient and modern populations. The study of human evolution in the genomic age has also highlighted the importance of population structure and migration in shaping genetic diversity. Modern humans didn't simply replace other human species. They formed part of a complex web of populations that exchanged genes and cultural innovations across vast geographical and temporal scales. This pattern of connectivity and exchange appears to have been a key factor in human evolutionary success. As we look toward the future, this research continues to inform our understanding of human genetics, health, and diversity. The ancient DNA preserved in our genomes provides a unique window into the past, while also helping us understand present-day human variation. Every individual alive today carries genetic variants that tell the story of ancient encounters between human populations, making each of us a living repository of human evolutionary history. The revelation that we were never truly alone, that our species developed through interaction and cooperation with other human groups, provides a powerful message for our modern world. It reminds us that diversity has always been a source of strength for humanity, and that our greatest achievements have often come through collaboration and exchange of ideas across different groups and cultures. This understanding of our shared heritage with other human species also raises important questions about conservation and our responsibilities to other species. If Neanderthals and Denisovans were our cousins rather than distant relatives, their extinction represents not just the loss of unique evolutionary lineages, but the silencing of voices that had contributed to the human story for hundreds of thousands of years. Their legacy lives on in our genes, and possibly in our cultures, but we can only imagine what additional contributions they might have made had they survived to the present day. The story of when we weren't the only human species ultimately reveals that human evolution has always been a collaborative enterprise. Our success as a species stems not from our ability to outcompete others, but from our capacity to learn, adapt, and incorporate beneficial traits and knowledge from diverse sources. As we face the challenges of the modern world, from climate change to disease to social inequality, this ancient lesson about the power of cooperation and exchange remains as relevant as ever. The genetic threads that connect us to our extinct cousins remind us that we are all part of a larger human family, one that extends back through time to include not just our direct ancestors, but also the other human species that shared our journey through deep time. Their contributions to our genetic heritage and cultural development make them part of our story, part of who we are today. In understanding their legacy, we gain not just knowledge about the past, but insights that can help guide us toward a more cooperative and inclusive future. Here's part 12 of the 12-part script for When We Weren't the Only Human Species. As we reach the end of our journey through humanity's complex past, we must confront a profound truth that challenges everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human. The story we've uncovered isn't one of linear progression or simple replacement, but rather a magnificent tapestry woven from countless threads of interaction, innovation, and integration. For too long, we've clung to the comforting notion that our species emerged triumphant through some inherent superiority, that we alone possess the spark of true humanity. But the evidence tells a far more nuanced and ultimately more beautiful story. We weren't conquerors who swept aside lesser beings. We were participants in an intricate dance of survival, adaptation, and mutual enrichment that spanned hundreds of thousands of years. Think about the Neanderthal genes flowing through your veins right now. Every time your immune system fights off an infection, there's a chance it's using tools inherited from our stocky, cold-adapted cousins. When you ascend to high altitudes and your body efficiently processes the thin air, you might be experiencing the legacy of Denisovan adaptations perfected in the mountains of Tibet. These aren't just genetic curiosities or evolutionary footnotes. They're living proof that human success has always been a collaborative effort. The archaeological record paints an equally compelling picture of cooperation and cultural exchange. We see Neanderthal communities adopting technologies pioneered by modern humans, while our own ancestors incorporated Neanderthal innovations into their toolkit. We find evidence of shared artistic traditions, overlapping symbolic behaviors, and what can only be described as genuine cultural fusion. These weren't hostile takeovers or grudging accommodations. They were the natural result of intelligent beings recognizing value in each other's innovations and perspectives. Perhaps most remarkably, we're discovering that the capacity for symbolic thought, complex language, and sophisticated tool-making wasn't unique to our lineage. Neanderthals created art in caves that still moves us today. They buried their dead with ceremony and care. They crafted tools with a precision that rivals our own prehistoric achievements. The Denisovans, meanwhile, were spreading their genetic and cultural influence across vast swaths of Asia, adapting to environments from tropical forests to Arctic tundra. This realization forces us to reconsider what we mean when we talk about human uniqueness. If our closest relatives possessed many of the cognitive and cultural capabilities we consider definitively human, then perhaps our true distinction lies not in what we could do alone, but in our remarkable ability to learn from and integrate with others. We were the ultimate collaborators, the species that could take the best innovations from multiple lineages and weave them into something greater than the sum of its parts. The genetic evidence supporting this collaborative model continues to grow stronger with each new discovery. Scientists have identified Neanderthal DNA sequences that influence everything from our sleep patterns to our pain tolerance. Denisovan genetic variants help some populations thrive at extreme altitudes or resist certain diseases. Even more intriguingly, we're finding evidence of genetic contributions from other, still mysterious human lineages that existed across Africa and Asia. This genetic mosaic tells a story of repeated contact and interbreeding over vast spans of time and space. It wasn't a single event, or even a series of isolated encounters. It was an ongoing process of genetic and cultural exchange that shaped the trajectory of human evolution in profound ways. Every major migration, every technological innovation, every adaptation to new environments was influenced by this continuous mixing of lineages. But the implications extend far beyond genetics and archaeology. This new understanding of our past offers powerful lessons for our present and future. In an era when division and tribalism seem to dominate headlines, the story of human evolution reminds us that our greatest achievements have always come through cooperation, not conquest. The very traits that make us human today are the product of collaboration between different groups, different perspectives, and different ways of being human. Consider the development of language, perhaps our most distinctive characteristic. Rather than emerging fully formed in a single lineage, the capacity for complex communication likely evolved through countless interactions between different human groups. Each encounter provided opportunities to share new concepts, refine existing ideas, and develop more sophisticated ways of expressing complex thoughts. The languages we speak today carry traces of this deep history, preserving echoes of conversations that took place around campfires tens of thousands of years ago. The same collaborative spirit drove technological innovation. The sophisticated tools found at archaeological sites across the world weren't the product of isolated genius, but of cumulative improvements shared across communities and generations. A spear thrower perfected by one group would be adopted and modified by their neighbors. A new method for creating fire would spread across continents through networks of trade and migration. Each innovation built upon previous discoveries, creating an accelerating cycle of technological advancement. Art and symbolic expression followed similar patterns. The cave paintings of Europe, the rock art of Australia, the carved figurines found across Africa and Asia all share common themes and techniques that suggest deep connections between disparate human communities. These weren't independent inventions, but variations on shared human themes, expressions of universal experiences filtered through local traditions and perspectives. Even our capacity for abstract thought and spiritual belief appears to have been enhanced through contact with other human lineages. The burial practices, artistic traditions, and symbolic behaviors found at Neanderthal and Denisovan sites suggest that these capabilities weren't unique to our own ancestors. Instead, they emerged from the rich cultural exchanges that characterized human evolution throughout the Pleistocene. This collaborative model of human evolution has profound implications for how we understand genetic diversity within our own species. Rather than seeing differences between human populations as evidence of separate evolutionary paths, we can recognize them as the legacy of our complex, interconnected past. The genetic variants that help some populations resist malaria, others process certain foods, or still others thrive in extreme environments aren't signs of fundamental difference. They're gifts from our diverse ancestry, tools in our collective toolkit for surviving and thriving in an ever-changing world. The story becomes even more fascinating when we consider ongoing discoveries of previously unknown human lineages. Ghost populations revealed through genetic analysis, mysterious tool traditions with no clear makers, artistic styles that don't fit neat categories, all suggest that the human family tree was even more complex than we've imagined. Each new discovery adds another thread to the tapestry, another voice to the chorus of our shared human story. Looking forward, this understanding of our past offers hope and guidance for navigating an increasingly complex world. The challenges we face today, from climate change to technological disruption to social inequality, require exactly the kind of collaborative approach that made us human in the first place. No single group, nation, or perspective has all the answers. But by combining our diverse talents, experiences, and insights, we can create solutions that none of us could develop alone. The genetic diversity that enriches our species today isn't a problem to be solved or a difference to be erased. It's a resource to be celebrated and protected. Every human population carries unique genetic adaptations and cultural knowledge that could prove crucial for our collective future. The high-altitude adaptations found in Tibetan populations, the disease resistance variants common in sub-Saharan Africa, the cold weather adaptations of Arctic peoples all represent evolutionary solutions that took thousands of years to develop and could be invaluable as we face new environmental challenges. Similarly, the cultural diversity that characterizes human societies isn't a barrier to cooperation, but a source of strength. Different communities have developed unique approaches to everything from sustainable agriculture to conflict resolution to artistic expression. By learning from and integrating these diverse perspectives, we can create more robust and adaptable solutions to complex problems. The story of human evolution also reminds us that change and adaptation are constants in our species' history. We've survived ice ages and volcanic winters, migrations across continents and expansions into new environments, technological revolutions and social transformations. Each challenge required us to adapt, innovate, and often collaborate with others who had different skills and perspectives. Our ability to change while maintaining our essential humanity has been our greatest strength throughout our evolutionary journey. As we stand at another crossroads in human history, facing challenges that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors, we can draw strength from their example. They showed us that diversity is a source of resilience, that cooperation can overcome competition, and that the future belongs to those who can learn from the past while adapting to new realities. The DNA flowing through our veins carries more than just genetic information. It carries the memory of countless encounters, innovations, and collaborations that shaped our species over hundreds of thousands of years. Every breath we take, every thought we think, every word we speak is influenced by this deep history of interaction and integration. We are living proof that humanity's greatest achievements come not from isolation, but from connection, not from purity, but from mixture, not from conquest, but from collaboration. In recognizing this truth, we honor not just our own ancestors, but all the human lineages that contributed to our shared heritage. The Neanderthals, who weathered ice ages in European caves, the Denisovans who crossed mountain ranges and ocean straits, the countless other human groups whose stories we're only beginning to uncover all played essential roles in making us who we are today. Their struggles, innovations, and insights live on in us, continuing to shape our species' trajectory long after their distinct lineages disappeared from the fossil record. This is perhaps the most profound lesson from our journey through humanity's complex past. We were never truly alone, and we were never meant to be. Our strength has always come from our connections to others, our ability to learn and grow through interaction and exchange. The story of human evolution isn't a tale of individual triumph, but of collective achievement. Not a narrative of replacement, but of integration. Not a history of separation, but of unity forged through diversity. As we face an uncertain future, we carry with us the wisdom of our ancestors and the promise of continued collaboration. We are the inheritors of humanity's greatest experiment in cooperation, the latest chapter in a story that began hundreds of thousands of years ago when different human lineages first encountered each other and chose connection over conflict. That choice, made countless times by countless individuals across the vast sweep of human history, brought us to where we are today and will guide us toward whatever comes next. In the end, we weren't the only human species, but we became the inheritors of all human wisdom, the carriers of all human dreams, the keepers of all human memories. And in that inheritance lies both our greatest responsibility and our greatest hope for the future.